would say the motto says it all, right? It's about synergizing and building partnerships. And I think it's very good to see the government reaching out to partners to explain and introduce the relevant policies that it has in mind, not only for the remainder of the current term in office until the next election, 2020, but also beyond that, and looking at how we can partner as international development partners, but also as international private sector financing partners to support the government in achieving the goals. As I said, 70% of the finance for the SDGs, for the Sustainable Development Goals and the Sustainable Development Agenda 2030, will need to come from private sector. So for private sector to understand the strategy ahead and the road ahead and how government is intending to partner, I think is very important. There is a lot that private sector can actually contribute. I mean, private sector is obviously the engine of growth and the engine of job creation. And that is vitally important to reduce poverty. If we want to be at zero poverty by 2030, we need to create jobs. Private sector is also an engine of innovation, right? And keeping up with the times, coming up with new solutions, with new marketable products, with new approaches. But it can also contribute quite a bit, and people don't necessarily think about it that way, to support the sustainable environmental pillar of the agenda by reducing their own carbon footprints in production, by saving water, for example, very important in a climate like Mongolia. Mining is a very water-intensive sector. There are important efforts here to reduce, recycle, reuse water. There is a water round table of a big mining company. And you know, the best news is actually it makes business sense because ultimately it reduces the operating costs. And it's also about getting private sector to invest into some of these green technologies that we want to see. Green energy, into energy efficient buildings and technologies. And so without the private sector, we can't do that. The public sector gives the incentives, provides the legal frameworks, provides the strategies, provides, tax breaks or other incentives to bring in private sector investments. But ultimately it is, in terms of volume, it is the investments from private sector that will have to carry the day on the SDGs. I usually prefer to talk about opportunities rather than problems, right? And I think we tend to forget that Mongolia has a lot going for it. It is a stable democracy. Mongolia has turned the page on the growth issues, has turned the page on the debt issues, together with the IMF and international funders that are part of the extended financing facility. So these are important enabling conditions, I think, to bring in private sector. Where I think there is room still for improvement is now looking at, policy continuity and at stable legal environments and at enhancing the certainty for private sector investments so that investors know that investments that they make are protected and will not be subjected to abrupt or unexpected policy changes that may basically change the bottom line for them. I think that's a very important area for an opportunity. And I think, again, that the government is looking at the right things. Part of that, for that to happen, is a stable and independent and professionalized civil service. Mongolia has passed the law on civil service reform last year to make the civil service more independent, merit-based, performance-based, client-oriented. It's an area where UNDP actually works together with the Civil Service Commission, with Parliament, with other actors on making sure, on facilitating now the implementation of that law to ultimately, I think, avoid the big turnarounds that we see in Mongolia with every election. I think that is something that everyone has been watching in the past with some concern. So if we can, again, turn the page on that important area, it would improve confidence quite a bit.